Okay, it has been quite a wild year in gaming. 2025. This one is going to go down in the history books for a lot of different reasons. And this is a video where I'm going to be kind of digesting everything that's happened this year into like one single video to kind of wrap things up since the end of the year is just upon us. And there have been a lot of good games that have came out. There's been some bad games. There's been a lot of crazy news stories that have happened throughout the year. So we're going to start, of course, talking about some of the games that we've had released. I've got this Wikipedia article, and of course, because of the end of the year, Wikipedia, of course, is doing their begging drives, as some people might call them. Actually, probably nobody calls them that, but they obviously always put those little exclaim, exclaimers, disclaimer rather, uh, that they're wanting to raise some funds to keep it going because it's supported by the viewers of the site, the users of the site. So, of course, as previously discussed, the game of the year was Claire Obscure Expedition 33. And I'm going to post some cards if I've discussed anything specific about certain things like the game of the year awards and whatnot. We'll put those up top so you can reference those if you'd like. We've had like some other award-winning games, of course, like Blueprints, Hollow Knight, Silk Song, Ghost of Yotei, which we're going to talk about in a little while, of course. Hades 2. Several good games that have came out. Some games that have gotten snubbed that I was a huge fan of, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Split Fiction, which was made by the same developers that made the 2021 Game of the Year, It Takes Two, and it was arguably just as good, if not even better, and it wasn't even a Game of the Year contender. That's how stacked this year was for the awards. So it's been kind of a wild time, and of course we even had some major stinkers like Mind's Eye, which was probably the most notable failure of a game this year. And I did cover the demo up there if you wanted to see some of the demo gameplay, or you could just play it for yourself. The demo's free to download on modern platforms. Besides the Switch 2, of course, I don't think that game's ever going to come out on the Switch 2. But anyways, let's go ahead and get right into some of the gaming topics, some of the gaming news. Um, this is kind of based in order of when things happened. I've already have all the tabs up at the top ready to go. So we're going to get right to it. This was kind of early on in the year where Warner Brothers had closed down a lot of its gaming stuff, namely Monolith Productions, which was the big one. They also, of course, closed shop on Multiverses, which was their free to play, like Smash Brothers knockoff kind of thing. They really kind of dropped the ball with how they handled that, of course. But Monolith was a big loss for anybody that has been a longtime fan of video games. They were responsible for a lot of games, of course, like the Lord of the Rings, Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War. They were responsible for the Fear franchise. They have had quite a storied history. They've been in the industry for a long time. At some point, of course, Warner Brothers acquired them, and then they closed shop, and that includes, of course, the Wonder Woman game that they were making, which who knows how that would have turned out. But given their prestige and their record, it probably would have been a pretty good competing title to something like Sony's Spider-Man games, for example. So that was kind of a major loss, of course. Very disappointing that that's happened. But if you know anything about Warner Brothers, ever since the Discovery merger that they did like a few years back, that company's kind of went downhill in a major way. And of course, even though it's not necessarily gaming related, so we're not going to really talk about it, there is the whole like buyout thing, the little war between Netflix and Paramount trying to buy out Warner Brothers and everything that's been going on with that. So that, of course, is relevant because whoever is going to be the winner of that buyout thing, if anybody's a winner, they're going to be taking over all the Warner Brothers gaming properties, which includes all the Midway stuff. So anybody that's into the classic stuff, like Mortal Kombat and so on, they're going to be owning that. And of course, they're going to be milking the hell out of that, whoever it is. Of course, they also put out the new Harry Potter game that came out a couple of years back. That was like literally one of the best selling games of 2023. I think it even beat out Call of Duty, or like it got really close at least. It was like the first year that it wasn't a Call of Duty game that was like the best selling game of the year or something crazy like that. Since that was kind of a big deal. So yeah, rest in peace to Monolith Productions, and hopefully everybody that was affected was able to, find work somewhere else. But of course, layoffs have been another big thing in the industry, so that's probably not the case for some at least. Now, this other one was kind of a bit of a good news topic, which is great because there wasn't a lot of good news this year. But Game Informer, after they were previously shut down by GameStop, who owned that magazine, they were able to basically spin off and start over. And they have been releasing new magazines of Game Informer, which is kind of a big deal for people that are fans of gaming magazines, because they were kind of like the last echelon. They were like the last one, at least as far as a mainstream game magazine. Like all the other ones that we fondly remember, like EGM, GamePro, Nintendo Power, and so on, they're gone. They're no longer around. And Game Informer was kind of like the last bastion of that until they got shut down, but they're back. So if you're a big fan of video game magazines, definitely look into it. You can, of course, they got the website and everything like that. I've got this just pulled from the website where they kind of talk about how they brought things back. They even brought back the original folks that worked on it. So that was pretty cool. So that was kind of like a good piece of news. Now, one of the most hotly anticipated games of last year was, of course, Assassin's Creed Shadows. And this was like a make or break kind of game for Ubisoft. Like they were betting huge on this game. And of course, there was a lot of controversy, namely around one of the characters that you play as, the samurai or whatever he is supposed to be, Yasuke. Yasuke was actually a historical figure in ancient Japanese history during the feudal times. He was a retainer of Lord Oda Nobunaga, and he is one of the playable characters in Assassin's Creed Shadows. And it was kind of a big controversy because, of course, Ubisoft finally doing a Assassin's Creed game in Japan, which is something that people have literally been asking for since Assassin's Creed 2. Like, I remember seeing people saying, hey, they should have an Assassin's Creed game in Japan. That would be perfect. And Ubisoft ignored that for many years. And I guess eventually they got the hint and brought us one. But of course, times have changed quite a bit since the release of Assassin's Creed 2. During an era when there was not a cottage industry of people making salacious and conspiratorial rants on the internet about video games and how they are permeating into our culture and everything like that, like we have nowadays, of course. So, of course, now it's a problem. Even though Yasuke has previously appeared in other games, like the Samurai Warriors franchise from Tecmo Koei, but I guess it wasn't a big deal back then. Now it is, because now it's Culture Wars, baby. And of course, there's also, I want to say Yahweh, but it's not Yahweh. It's Naue. Yahweh is a completely different thing, right? But Naue, of course, is the female protagonist. And as far as this game is concerned, I actually did end up picking this game up. I did enjoy what I played of it, although I'm not the hugest fan of it at the same time. But one thing that was kind of cool is that they have completely different play styles. Naue plays like more of the traditional Assassin's Creed style character. You're supposed to use stealth and you're supposed to take out enemies one by one and stuff like that. That is her play style. Whereas Yasuke is more of a brute force kind of character. He just rushes in there, fights several guys at once, uses huge weapons, uses his large body with his massive armor to his advantage in those situations. Not quite so great at stealth. They have these segments where Naoe can kind of walk over like a piece of lumber or something that could walk across a thing. Yasuke can't do that because he's too heavy, so he'll break through it. So there is like some like a different dichotomy depending on how you want to play the game that you have to factor in, and you have the ability to switch between the two characters in the middle of a mission. So um not their best effort, but I definitely would say it's one of the better recent Assassin's Creed games. This one reminded me a lot of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which also had two playable characters, a male and a female. But it was a little different because you're using them in tandem rather than just choosing which one of the two you wanted to play at the beginning, and you're playing through the whole game that way. And they played mostly the same in that game, so it's just your preference on if you wanted to play a male or female character. Whereas this one actually kind of added a little more to it. Now, it did have a little bit of performance issues and stuff like that, but I don't know. I thought Assassin's Creed Shadows was actually a pretty decent game. I think the controversy behind it was overblown, and it just wasn't that big of a deal. Now, from what I understand, according to Ubisoft at least, it was their second best-selling Assassin's Creed game. Valhalla was their best-selling, and they, of course, attributed that to the COVID pandemic from 5 years back. And because a lot of people were staying inside playing video games instead of doing real shit. So, but yeah. And then, of course, later on in the year, we had the Nintendo Switch 2 came out. The first new video game console that we've seen in 5 years. This is Nintendo's newest entry, of course, replacing the Switch 1, which is still supported. We're going to get into some of the weird crap that's been going on in terms of like the Switch 1 and some other game consoles in a little while. But they said a fastest selling record, selling 3.5 million units in just the first 4 days on market. From what I had read, they have apparently projected to sell 19 million Switch 2 systems by the end of their fiscal year, which I think their end of their fiscal year is like March of 2026. I guess we'll wait and see, but the previous projections is only 15 million. So if that's true, that would definitely make it one of the fastest, if not the fastest selling console of all time within its first year being on the market. The Switch 2, of course, has had a lot of controversial stuff going on, of course, being the most expensive Nintendo hardware that has officially launched, starting at $450 if you just get just the console itself, or $500 if you get it bundled with the Mario Kart World Digital, which, from what I understand, that bundle is going to be going away soon. They're apparently no longer manufacturing it, so what's remaining in stores is the last of it, I guess. So if you want to get that bundle, I guess now's the time if you can. Especially if you don't want to pay increased prices, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. I did get the Switch 2 at launch. I do enjoy the console. I don't really play it a lot. To be honest, I'm more of a PC gamer. But I did pick up the Mario Kart bundle, of course. I did get Donkey Kong Bonanza, Metroid Prime 4, also for Nintendo first-party titles. And then I did pick up a couple of third-party titles. I picked up Cyberpunk 2077 and the Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma, I think it is. Played all of them to at least some degree. And, I've had a pretty good time with it. It's definitely a logical evolution from the first Switch system. And, so it's probably, if you're a big Nintendo fan, it's definitely worthwhile. If you're more of a casual fan, maybe not so much right now. You're probably waiting for a new Zelda or Mario game or something like that. Like one of the heavy hitters, right? I guess Mario Kart, is considered a heavy hitter, but opinions have been mixed on the new one, I would say. And, it's got some fun stuff, although I'm not a fan of the fact that they went back to the crappy battle mode like the original Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U had, instead of like an actual battle mode like, every other Mario Kart, basically. So, yeah. Um, and that's going to take us to Microsoft. Ooh, boy, they've had such a year, such a year. There's so many topics I could bring up in regards to Microsoft. But I had to choose just one in the interest of time for this video because I don't want to make this like a 3-hour video with like 2.5 hours of it just trashing on Microsoft. I probably could do that, honestly. But this is the one that really stung for me personally. When they closed down The Initiative, who was this development studio that they actually built from the ground up instead of just bought another company and another company, another company like they've been doing for the last several years. This was actually a homegrown studio from Microsoft. And they were working on the Perfect Dark reboot, which they had previously teased. It looked amazing. Honestly, to me, it looked like a natural progression of the series, actually making it more of a spy kind of thing and whatnot. Because honestly, the Perfect Dark series has only had inklings of that stuff. You know, more of a first person shooter with just some of that James Bond type stuff thrown in there. But this one was actually looked like it was going to be like a proper, like actual first person spy game. It had parkour and everything like that as well. And it got canceled because it's Microsoft. That's really the only explanation we need here. I believe that Crystal Dynamics was also assisting in development as well. So, I mean, they're still around. Obviously, they're not associated with Microsoft. I think it's THQ Nordic or Embracer Group. You know, that's the parent company that actually own them. They also canceled Rare's Everwild as well. So that basically is leaving Rare to suffer in, live service solitude with their Sea of Thieves, right? Which that's all Rare is now. They're just a live service company, unfortunately. So that's another really sad thing as well, if you think about it. Because, I mean, you think about all the history that Rare has put out through the years, especially when they were working with Nintendo. I mean, tons of bangers. Woo! I mean, you got Donkey Kong Country, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark. They've had so many games that they put out that were amazing. All the way back to the NES. Jeez, what a loss. I mean, they're still around, obviously. But like I said, they're just stuck with Sea of Thieves. And we've had some good news, some more good news, of course, the Stop Killing Games initiative, which good old Ubislop. I think I called them Ubisoft before, but I like to call them Ubislop when they screw up. They had closed down The Crew, which was a racing game that they had, a multiplayer racing game that could also be played single player. And you figure, oh, well, if they close down the game, you could still play the single player. Nope. No, that's not the case at all. The game required you to be online, even if you were just playing single player and not racing with anybody else. And they didn't put out a patch to just like, okay, we're just shutting off the online multiplayer, but you can keep on playing the game. No, the game's just dead. Now, there was some good news about that because some passionate fans have actually brought the game back online, or they're trying to bring the game back online from what I understand. So there is that silver lining, but the Stop Killing Games initiative is the other silver lining here because they were able to reach the necessary number of signatures required to get reviewed by the European Commission. So they're wanting to set up goals that would allow for games like The Crew to still work in some format, whether that would be an offline mode, which could easily be done for a game like that, or if it's a game that's very, very strict on needing to be online. They want to at least offer an ability for fans to kind of take over at their own time and expense to keep those games working, right? That's what this initiative is about. Now, this is still a developing story. They're still getting things sorted out. politics, these legal proceedings, they can take a while. But this is a really good step, I would say. And, Accursed Farms, Ross, he was the one that started this whole thing. And he got a lot of people on board. And it was just awesome to see all of the community outreach in terms of the Stop Killing Games initiative. Great stuff. Great stuff indeed. So hopefully it will go the places that we want it to go. And of course, if it is successful in their initial goals, that's going to mean that developers, whenever they're making a game, they'll need to make sure that it's able to be set in offline state to be playable when possible, in the event that they do shut off online services for a game, as opposed to doing just like what they did with The Crew and just unceremoniously killing the game. And essentially any money you had spent on the game is thrown away now. You did not get what you paid for, essentially, right? Or if it's a game that's going to be too strict with the online requirements, some of the examples are showing like Fortnite, World of Warcraft, they want it to at least be clear on how long these services will be guaranteed through on those games, so that's actually labeled on the box art, on the online storefront page for the game or whatever. So like if you were to purchase the game or purchase any kind of DLC or microtransactions for, say, a free-to-play game like this, you at least have a clear-cut expectation. So hopefully they are successful. Now, this one's going to be kind of interesting to talk about because this year set a new precedent in video game hardware pricing. If you are kind of new to the video game space, you're a younger person, maybe you didn't really start gaming until the PS4 era or something like that. One, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I definitely want to try to appeal to younger people as well, because I think the kind of stuff I want to say can apply to a wide range of gamers. But for two, you're probably not used to the fact that as video game generations go on, the consoles get cheaper. For example, the PlayStation 3, this is a big one here. When it came out, it costed up to $600 when it first came out back in 2006. And the prices had dropped over the years to where when I bought a second PS3 in 2013 on Black Friday, I got a second PS3 that had more than 4 times the storage space of that original PS3 model, had 250 gigabyte hard drive, and it came bundled with 2 games, The Last of Us and Batman Arkham Origins, both of which were games that came out that year. So they were still like full price games. And I got this bundle for $200 in 2013. They don't do that kind of thing for video game hardware anymore. As a matter of fact, they do the opposite. Every major gaming platform has had at least one price increase this year. Microsoft was the worst offender, which actually had 2 price increases. And they're up to, I believe, $650 for the 1 gigabyte Xbox Series X disc version when it was launched at $499, $500. So it had a $150 price increase over a 5-year period. That's not something that's ever happened before in any game generation. You can look back, go all the way back to the Atari days and stuff like that. The prices just got cheaper as things went on because they were able to get the costs manufacturing down and also not be affected by what they say now, market conditions, which is a phrase that I'm pretty sure never really existed in the mainstream lexicon before this year. It refers to things like the prices of components going up, such as RAM, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. It also refers to the tariff situation because, we got some crazy tariff stuff going on because of, a certain administration that currently runs the US government. Now, that's only going to really affect the US pricing of stuff, of course, which, of course, this is all related to US stuff. Although I understand there have been price increases throughout the world. So they've probably have had all kinds of different situations. But yeah, just unprecedented and sucks. Oh, and look at this. Our good old buddy Larry Bundy Jr. right here. He actually did a tweet. Shout out to Larry Bundy, especially if he's watching this video, but no, seriously. But he here he is. He's got an image. PlayStation 1, $299 to $99. PS2, $299 to $149. PS3, $599 to $249. PS4, $399 to $299. And then PS5, $499 to $549. So the first increase, not decrease in price. Go figure on that. So we can go ahead and fast forward a little bit to the other Ancient Japan game that came out this year. Of course, Ghost of Yotei. As this article says, Ghost of Gamergate. This game was also a victim of the culture wars, as it were, which is kind of funny because whenever the Assassin's Creed Shadow stuff was going on earlier this year, a lot of people were like, oh, we're just going to wait for Ghost of Yotei. This is going to be great. Even though they had already announced that it was a female protagonist and all that good stuff. But there were some crazy things, which I'm going to post a card. I did a video talking about the Ghost of Yotei boycott. And essentially, there were a number of different factors involved with this boycott. There is the lead voice actress, of course, Erika Ishii. She was the lead voice actress of the game. And I believe they also kind of modeled the main character a bit for her as well. And of course, that was another thing, where they're like, oh, she's ugly, That's another thing with the culture wars, like they want nothing but like plastic models essentially for these women characters. They don't really consider the fact that there is an actual diversity in how people look. Right. But anyways, she apparently has a bit of an activist streak to her. She proclaims to be like anti-fascist and all this good stuff. Right. So, of course, that was a major controversy. And on top of that, there was a person that worked at Sucker Punch who had made a pretty crude and a rude joke in regards to when right-wing commentator Charlie Kirk was assassinated on September 10th. And, obviously was tasteless and everything like that. Now, there was a big push to boycott the game after that was all discovered and that this person was working for Sucker Punch and everything like that. Now, Sucker Punch had apparently let the person go and they, said their stuff in regards to it, and they said it was wrong. But that didn't stop the boycott machine. Now, how did that boycott machine work? Turns out the game sold pretty good. It sold pretty good. From what I understand, it sold about as well, based on the early projections, as what Ghost of Tsushima did during that same time span. And that's considering that Ghost of Tsushima came out during COVID. So it had kind of like that whole like, oh, everybody's shut in playing video games kind of thing to help boost the sales, just like Assassin's Creed Valhalla that we talked about earlier did. So I understand it sold a little bit less than Ghost of Tsushima, but it still sold well within their expectations. From what I understand, there are certain YouTubers, of course, that are saying that these outlets like Circana, which actually publish the actual sales data, saying that they're lying for, because like Sony paid them or some shit like that, some kind of complete garbage that's easily debunked. Anybody that's got like 3 functioning brain cells can figure it out, right? How to read like some sales charts. But I digress, a lot of people seem to like the game. I have not played it personally. So I can't really comment on if the game's worthwhile or not. If it's as good or better or worse than Ghost of Tsushima, I can't really comment on that. But it does seem like the people that actually played the game generally like it. It did get some nominations for various awards and stuff like that, more so than Assassin's Creed Shadows did. So there's that, I guess. And then, of course, actually, there was this game called Horses that recently came out. It was banned from Steam, right? And there was some kind of crazy controversies going on regarding that. A lot of confusion. I did do a video talking about it, of course. Actually, I did two. Let's go ahead and show the other one up there as well, so you can reference those. And basically, this was kind of like an art project kind of game. It's not really the kind of game that you play to have fun. This was put out by Santo Ragioni, who did put out some other critically acclaimed games like Saturnalia. And, it's just a short little indie game. It costs like $5. You are this person that has to work on this farm or something like that, where you have to manage horses. Except when you go to the farm, you discover that these horses are actually people that are naked and they have horse masks on their head, like sewn on their heads. So, as you can expect, some pretty disturbing stuff happens as a result in the game. But the nudity apparently is censored in the game. And then one of the alleged controversies regarding a minor depicting person, which was allegedly the reason that Valve had, banned the game from Steam back in 2023. That apparently is not actually in the game. So it is kind of a case of he said, she said, but I figure this was a pretty appropriate thing to bring up. And of course, also to kind of signal boost the videos I did earlier. So yeah. And then given the craziness with the market and everything like that, this is not that shocking. It is a little bit, but not that shocking in the grand scheme of things. Physical video game software and hardware sales had the worst November in the United States since 1995, which I did do a video discussing that. And that video's done pretty well so far for my channel. Being a small channel, usually getting a couple hundred views on videos on average. Who knows how many views this will get. This will probably get like 50 views because of it being so long. Prove me wrong, guys. But anyways, this was kind of a wild thing. Of course, again, Circana, that company that apparently lies for Sony for cultural war reasons. They were talking about that stuff. They track the sales data, selling how many, hardware units, how much revenue that's bringing in, the physical retail sales of video game software and so on. I don't know if they're counting digital sales as well in this here. From understanding, some of the Black Friday sales were actually pretty decent itself, but they're talking about for the entire month of November, and this is for the United States, of course. So again, it doesn't really paint the full picture because I don't know how it's going to compare with like Europe, UK, Japan, and so on. But it is definitely a very interesting thing to point out. Another really interesting thing about this is, you have Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, the big three. So you figure they're always going to be the top three in terms of like video game sales on pretty much any given month, right? I mean, there are other companies that sell video game hardware, but you figure they're always going to dominate those three spots. Apparently not this year, because Microsoft was actually number 4. It got beat out by this little box called the Next Playground, which is basically like a family-friendly game console that essentially is a next generation Kinect shaped like a GameCube, little box. It's got the camera on it, and you play it like the Kinect. You're waving your arms and moving around and stuff like that to play the video games. I guess it's got microphones and things like that too. I've never really messed with that kind of thing, but that actually outsold the Xbox systems this year, which probably isn't that surprising because I understand this next playground's a lot more affordable. It's like, I think it's like $250 or something like that. So it's actually the cheapest of like the modern video game systems out there. And they have this whole model where, they don't have like physical game software or anything like that. You have like a yearly subscription that you pay for this next playground, and you just get the whole library of games for that yearly subscription. So that could be kind of an interesting development to see how this little console does going forward. But the fact that it actually charted as well as it did this year is kind of interesting. I'm kind of curious to see if it's just like a fluke, or if, hey, maybe this might be a new way forward for like at least casual video games that are tailored for little kids and stuff like that. Because I think they have like Bluey games and crap like that on there. So, but yeah, pretty wild stuff here. And then, of course, they go through the top selling games. Of course, Call of Duty Black Ops 7 was the number one seller. But from what I've heard, Battlefield has actually outsold Call of Duty this year. It did have a 1 month head start, so that helps. But if it turns out at the end of the year, they find out that Battlefield still outsold COD, it would be literally the first time ever that's happened. Battlefield got really close in 2016 when they released Battlefield 1, which was a huge entry in the series. Very popular, very successful. And that same year, Activision kind of shot itself in both feet by releasing Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. And it barely just eked out a win, just barely, by getting people on that nostalgia and including a copy of Modern Warfare Remastered, the original Modern Warfare, the remaster of that, to help entice people to buy this game that they weren't that interested in otherwise. It took all that effort for them to barely eke out a win on Battlefield. And it seems like they're kind of doing some of the same stuff, since I heard that the new Black Ops 7 was sold for as little as $35 recently, which is unprecedented also for a COD game to get that cheap just a month after launch. But these are strange times, people. And we've got some even stranger times up ahead to look forward to in 2026. Exploding RAM prices can doom the next console generation. It could doom hardware for a while, if we're honest. Let me take a drink for this one, guys. Because this is all related to the fact that we've got the AI bubble going on. A lot of companies are betting big on AI. A lot of these data centers are buying up the supply of RAM. It's causing the price of RAM to shoot up. Now, when it comes to that, right now what's being affected is if, say, you're wanting to build a computer and, from scratch or whatever, you got to buy sticks of RAM, right? To put in the computer. It won't function without the RAM. Obviously, it's one of the necessary components. And the RAM modules, they are purchased by consumers as well as businesses, enterprise, in the case of the AI, right? And the AI companies have been buying up a lot of this RAM lately. So it's limited the supply, which means on the consumer level, there's a lot less RAM out there than there was previously. And that's what's increased the price. We're getting to a point where I think 64 gigs of DDR5, some people have been seeing it for like $900, $1,000. That costs more than the actual CPU or graphics card in your computer, which is insane because 3-4 months ago, that same RAM probably cost like $250, maybe. So yeah, it's pretty wild. And you only need 64 gigs, obviously, if you're just wanting to game. But even if you're just wanting like 32, which is kind of what the recommended thing is now, that's going for like $400 to $500 right now. It's absolutely insane. And apparently it's going to get just worse. It's just going to get worse. That's going to mean that we're probably going to have a lot more expensive next generation hardware than we've had before. So like consoles right now, of course, costing $600 after previously costing $500. Well, I mean, how would you like to pay $1,000 for a new game console at launch? I know I wouldn't. I don't know very many people that would do it. I don't know anybody that I would like to do that. There's going to be some people that, of course, will do that just because they have to be early adopters. They have to hop on board right off the bat. That could be just because they're tech enthusiasts, and maybe because they do YouTube channels like this and they want to talk about the stuff in detail because they want to be able to actually have that stuff. Well, it's going to cost a lot more. So anybody that just wants to play video games, they're going to have to pony up if they want to play the latest crap, right? Good thing we've got massive backlogs. Good thing we've got a bunch of retro games we could play, whether on the original hardware or emulators or whatever. So, yeah, it's just a wild time. And even if the AI bubble bursts and these companies start pulling out, it's going to take a while before it gets caught up. Now, if you're wanting to get like a new computer, at least in the very near future, you might not do so bad with a pre-built machine because usually component prices versus the prices of pre-built machines, there's a lagging indicator. Usually it's a few months or so because these companies that make these pre-built computers, they will buy these parts several months in advance. And so they're going to be putting orders in soon for new stuff. And those systems are going to be very expensive because of that. And then they're starting to talk about that they're going to be increasing the price of graphics cards because graphics cards happen to also use RAM, right? So those prices are going to go up. And then you have companies like Nvidia talking about reducing the supply of graphics cards by 40%. So you've got an additional crunch because there's going to be even less supply. So unless the demand really sinks down to match that, those prices are really going to shoot up also. And they're talking about that the cards that are going to be affected are going to be like the RTX 5070 and 5060 series, the cards that are kind of priced for regular people that just want a good computer. They don't want the top notch, top of the line stuff. They just want something that will be able to do ray tracing, that will be able to do 120 plus FPS on most games. Just stuff that would essentially make it a better experience, generally speaking, than what you're going to get on like a PlayStation 5. That's why they're spending a little more to buy something like an RTX 5070, which I think goes for about 550 right now, something like that. But instead, how about paying like $900 for like one of the remaining one of those, and then you're gonna have to pay like maybe like $1,400 for a 5080, and that's like the only card you could find. And we're not even talking about the 5090. That thing's insane. So that's kind of the way that thing's gonna go, and that's gonna affect the prices of everything that uses RAM. It really is because there's just going to be a lot less RAM to go around, especially since you had Micron. They're going to be selling all their RAM to these AI data centers. They have stopped, or they're going to be stopping rather, the production of consumer level RAM. So that's going to leave a lot of those companies involved, which of course means less competition, which is another thing that increases prices, right? So we have a hell of a time to look forward to in 2026. And thanks to a lot of stuff that happened in 2025, but there were some good things that came out of this year. So I'm pretty glad that we've had the time we've had for a lot of this stuff. And I think that's just going to do it. Don't forget to check out the video up there. That's the one I most recently did. And if you go on the opposite corner, of course, that's one the algorithm is going to be recommending to you. Definitely check that out as well. And don't forget to click that subscribe in the lower left-hand corner if you haven't already. But that's going to be the last line.